Hello, welcome back. So if this dog will leave me alone, I hope to do some oil glazes. If I start yelling no at you, please understand I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to the dog. Once again, one of the things I like about my approach to painting, that it's so layer-ish. And it's layer-ish because I'm bonkers about transparent color, because I know what the old masters knew, and that is that transparent colors glow. Transparent colors are much richer than opaque colors. And therefore, if you're painting in transparent colors, then you're painting in layers and layers and layers. I was maybe first influenced in this regard, directly influenced by the work of Maxfield Parrish. I was a freelance illustrator, just getting started in my illustration career 30 years ago, 1987. I mean, I'd been. That's not quite accurate. I'd done it a number of years before that, but anyway, it was a shifting point. It was going to another level as an illustrator is maybe a more accurate way to put it. And I walked into a bookstore one day, and I saw a book about Maxfield Parrish, and it was an epiphany. It was just one of those moments, you know. The angels started singing, bah! A light shone down on my head from heaven. You know, it's one of those things. I picked it up and said, "Oh my goodness, that is what I want to do." When I saw Maxfield Parrish, and whoops, you know what? I need to move again. Sorry. I thought I was all adjusted for sunlight, but now it's coming around to my umbrella one more time. So now I need to move you. And of course, we're standing on very uneven ground, so bear with me. Okay, that'll have to do. Maxfield Parrish. Saw his work, this book about him. I still have the book. And I pored over that book. And especially way back in the back, there was an appendix. It was not a book for artists, or the whole thing would have been about his technique. It was just a book for people that liked pretty pictures, made by Maxfield Parrish. And so there was a section in the back about his technique. And maybe you don't know how Maxfield Parrish. Now, first of all, who is Maxfield Parrish? Okay, so for you Americans, for you fellow Yanks, he's kind of like the Norman Rockwell one generation earlier. Okay, so if you think of Norman Rockwell as World War II and after, Maxfield Parrish did, you know, Saturday Evening Post covers and things like that, magazine covers, back in the golden age of magazine covers when they were a work of art on each cover. Maxfield Parrish was one generation earlier, so he would have been turn of the century up into actually he worked until 1970 something, I think. He died at age 95, and I believe he did his last published painting when he was 95. So I like him for that reason too. What an inspiration. Still painting at age 95, painting well at age 95. You could double check me on that. It might have been 94, but anyway. So that's who he was. A lot of fantasy stuff. And if you look him up, if you just Google Maxfield Parrish, P-A, 2 R's, I think, P-A-R-R-I-S-H, but Google will fix you anyway, even if you misspell it. You just look at, and as soon as you see one of his hit images, you'll go, "Oh, yeah." You'll go, I see that. I've seen that before. And even if you haven't seen it, you've seen knockoffs of it. For instance, the very first cover to the movie The Princess Bride, done in the 80s, was a knockoff of Maxfield Parrish. So he's been imitated. Anyway, his technique was, he painted in oils, and of course he painted starting in the 19th century, so he didn't have acrylics. He would have given his right arm to have the tools we have now, I'm sure. Anyway, he did one layer of painting in cobalt blue, pure blue, the entire painting. So at the end of his first layer, his painting looked like a Wedgwood dinner plate, if you know what that is. You know, one of these dinner plates that has a sort of like a Currier and Ives type scene on it, you know. Typical Currier and Ives, a Wedgwood dinner plate, you know, a horse and buggy going over a old stone bridge with a mill in the background. But it's all in blue and white, nothing but blue and white. Got the picture? So that was Maxfield's painting at the end of stage 1, all in oil. Then he would let that dry, and that took a while back in those days when it was linseed oil and everything. And then he would varnish the whole thing, and then he would do red on top of the blue. So then he had a purplish bluish dinner plate looking thing, and then he varnished that, and then he did yellow on top of that, and he was done. So go look at Maxfield Parrish. So that was essentially the technique that I adopted for my illustration, for most of my illustration career. Now, I didn't do it in oil paint. I did it in pen and ink and watercolor. Now, I know that sounds crazy. What do you mean you did it in pen and ink? Well, go look at my illustration page, and you'll see many illustrations still that are done in color, and they were all done that way. I would do a pen and ink illustration, then either sometimes with airbrush and sometimes with watercolor. I would do a layer of blue, then a layer of each one separated, so there's no bleeding in between. Blue, then red, then yellow, and I'm done. Anyway, so I learned to paint in transparent colors starting 30 years ago, following Maxfield Parrish. Okay, time now for the rag. And boy, there's not much ragging I need to do here, because I don't want this stuff too light. I sort of like the way it is right now. But I'll do some anyway. So I learned to paint in transparent colors from him. One of the things I remember most learning from him, because before that, I had an art major in college, which did not do me a lot of good, but that's another story. I painted in like a tradition, whenever I did oil paintings, which was not very often, or even acrylics, I painted traditionally. Mix the colors on your palette and put them on your paint, put them on your painting, put them on your canvas. Generally speaking, a opaque process, very traditional oil painting, okay, which is opaque. So that's the way I painted before that. So one of the things I remember most clearly learning from Maxfield Parrish was that in mixing paints, the three primary colors are yellow, red, and blue, right? And maybe black and white, and then you get whatever you want. I'm being overly simplistic there. Don't ask me about the black. And then, but if you're painting in transparent layers, the primary colors are not blue, like ultramarine or cobalt, but in fact, cyan or phthalo blue is very close. And not red, but magenta, and yes, yellow, transparent yellow. And it's hard to find a transparent yellow, so Indian yellow is my favorite. Okay, the glazes are finished. What next? At this point, I usually do one of two things. I either do pencil or painting with brushes. And there's no good reason, no, it's very intuitive. I have no idea. But today, I would say I am in the mood to paint with brushes and then do pencil. So let's proceed. And again, one of the things I like about my technique is that at no point in the process do I need to do everything. Do you know what I mean by that? All I need to do now is draw. I'm going to take another picture of that big oak tree. All I need to do right now is draw, focusing on the dark things, if you will, the dark images, the dark shapes in the scene in front of me. So hang on, I just took a picture. I have an old phone I'm using, by the way. I'm finding it quite handy, quite a surprise to me. I'm finding it quite handy as a camera. So it still works perfectly well as a camera. Okay, let's start doing some drawing then. Love this tree. Love today's tree. It's the most dramatic, I think, of the three that I've done in the last couple of days. So let me just reiterate real briefly. If you want to paint in transparent colors, red is not on your palette. I have red on my palette, but it's because it's there waiting for me to begin the opaque stage. When I'm painting transparent, like my acrylics, it's not red, it's magenta. Sort of a pinkish, purplish red. Most of you, I think, know what magenta is. And it's the color that is used in the four-color printing process, of course, as well, is magenta. CMYK, if you know those letters from four-letter printing. From four-color printing, CMYK, the M is magenta. Because there's no such thing as a, I know this sounds strange, try to listen to me, there's no such thing as a transparent red. Red, when it goes transparent, is no longer red. It's sort of a sickly powder pink. It just does not translate into red. That's why four-color printing process does not have red in it. It has magenta. So how do you get red in four-color printing? The answer is, and same thing with painting in layers, you put down your magenta and then you put down yellow on top of the magenta. And in the right percentages, the appearance will be, whatever color, fire engine red that you want. I'm happy to say I'm liking, I think, the way this painting is going. Sometimes when I get this far into a painting, I realize I didn't, all of my earlier decisions, not all of my earlier decisions were right on. I made some errors in judgment, usually in the realm of composition. And so I've got a problem child on my hands. And many of those problem children, so to speak, that's what I call a problem painting. Many of those problem children can be rescued. I had an experience just last September, 2 months ago. I was painting with my good buddy Mike Rooney, and this is the 5th year in a row that he and I have gotten together sometime in the summer or fall and painted for a whole week down at the coast in North Carolina. So we were painting together with, this year it was three other painters. And at the end of the week, I had one good painting, and I think it was 4 problem children. I don't know about you, but one good painting and 4 problem children is not a good track record. I went to bed Thursday night, not very happy. It's like, oh my goodness, I've completely lost it. But overnight, the way it's like, because the week was over on Friday, so I had one more day. The sale was Friday night, So all night I tossed and turned. All night I was painting those 4 paintings. All night I was reworking, trying to solve problems in my sleep and half asleep and awake and so on. The good news is I got up on Friday morning and said, okay, today's job is easier. I don't go out to paint. I just try to rescue all of these, again, what I'm calling problem children. And amazingly, I say this not to brag, but to say I was actually quite surprised. I managed to rescue all 4. One was a D, and I turned it into an A. One was a C, turned that into an A. One was a B minus, turned that into an A. And one was an A minus. And so let me give you a general tip, though, because I see this. By the way, let me tell you a little bit about my life that informs my painting a lot. No. Informs my teaching a lot. Informs what I say to you guys. I belong to in fact, I started a painters group. Oh, somebody's in the house. How about that? All of a sudden a voice comes. I knocked on the door. I've been out here all day making noise. And this lady's around the corner. You know what? I better hang up, you guys. I'll be back. Did you leave any comments? Do I ever paint animals? Nope, not much. I better go talk to my host. Thanks. Bye.